This sitting is now resumed.
Government notices be committed.
Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to give notice of the representation of the People Amendment Bill 2019.
First reading of bills be committed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the representation of the People Amendment Bill 2019.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. Government business is resumed. The honourable member for St. George North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I feel compelled to speak on this particular amendment in the House, the standing orders of the House of Assembly. This is, to my mind, a very fundamental change from when we took office. Over the past 25 years, I sat in this Parliament asking for a fundamental change to the way how business was done. And I'm very happy that the government has instituted the new measures which would bring fundamental change to where how this House of Assembly is done, especially at the estimate time. And the reason why I say so, Mr. Speaker, that for the very first time we see that Parliament will have ultimate power in making fundamental change. I see it as a means of putting power back in the hands of Parliament. Because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, we are accountable to Parliament. And Parliament is accountable to the people of Barbados. Now, the reason why I say so, because having done political science at the university and having been a practitioner for the past 30 or 40 years, I see fundamental change not for the immediate future here, but for future generations. Can you imagine a Parliament of 30 members with the government having 20 members and the opposition 10, where the future, where the opposition can question ministers, question the system, and look at what we are doing within government? And I understand, Mr. Speaker, because I know in the early 90s, when I was trained in this Parliament, not necessarily as a parliamentarian, because I think one of the things that we need young parliamentarians to get involved in is the estimates debate. To read the estimates. I was told years ago, and I want to compliment a former clerk of Parliament, Mr. Branca, who sat down and taught young parliamentarians of the day how to read the estimates, what it stands for. There's everything in the estimate in what governs the government. The estimate contains, Mr. Speaker, the fundamental, how ministers or ministries will spend the taxpayers' money. But the question comes, do you see everything you don't? So that within a week's time, a scrutiny cannot be adequately carried out within those estimates by just a minister gets up in the first reading speech and speak for 30 minutes. Sometimes you last for 3 days, and then you only do examine one head. And to examine those heads at the time, Mr. Speaker, you can't do an adequate job. I see this as a fundamental change, where for the very first time, and I must say, and I think that the government need now to publicize this whole aspect, because this is a fundamental change, Mr. Speaker. The standing orders of this House is now being changed to bring persons who are not members, strangers, Mr. Speaker, will be coming to the House for the very first time, and that's fundamental. That a permanent secretary or the technocrats will be able to come into this House. Senators from the other place will be able to come to this House, the ministers, to answer questions from the members of Parliament. Now, and I said before, I see it for the future. Imagine 2010, government to opposition, where ministers are put under severe scrutiny, because I came through that period. I came through a period, Mr. Speaker, when we had 20 seats, where we had less, where the government had 16 and we had 14. But we could not do very much in the last session, because the government of the day would spend 2 or 3 days in first reading speech, and then you're left with 1 day to make any fundamental change. So you want to examine one head. And I think the Prime Minister was right when she said that here is a case where democracy really has been put back to the people. And we need to understand that this here is fundamental, putting power back in the hands of Parliament. And despite the government having, because people criticize the government for having the number of ministers, but this, and it is this government then that has made those fundamental change, and I want to compliment the government for doing exactly that. But we need to go further though, because we need to see a change where, as you said, Mr. Speaker, the Speaker can be able to come in and sit in the committees and discuss those or any fundamental change. What happens not only in his or her constituency, but also to look at the wider aspect of how we are governing in Barbados. Now, if these changes were taking place 10 years ago, a number of things that we now find within the ministries would have been avoided. If we were able to question a minister, the ministry's official, things like Cahill, things like when you permits being done in the Ministry of Public Works, you have over 2,000 permits being given out in 1 or 2 sessions. If we were able to do these things, I believe, Mr. Speaker, a lot of things could have been avoided. But this is democracy at work, and the public must be informed. I think that the government needs to publicize this particular bill, particular aspect, because it's fundamental, and the people of Barbados need to be aware, because I think the media itself has not been doing a good job in terms of publicizing, in terms of making people understand the fundamental things of this change. This is a fundamental thing, and the public needs to be aware. The educational institutions, university, the colleges need to understand that this is fundamental change. I also say as a case where we would have to change the composition, the setup of Parliament, where you bring in chairs. It is American system based with the British Westminster system, where persons will be able to ask and answer questions, so that the composition, the whole entire structure of Parliament will have to change, especially when you're looking at money resolutions. The people's money is fundamental. We need to understand that. How we spend money in this country. Is a minister spending money based on his own perspective, or based on the perspective of the party's manifesto, or what the public needs? I can take a case, for example, welfare. I can take a case in point of welfare, Mr. Speaker, and I get very annoyed, and I have been, this is nothing new, because I have been saying this for years. I have been criticized on numerous occasions for saying things that people think I should not say. But I I saw a comment. I saw a comment recently where a member of parliament had a fire in a constituency, and that member of parliament was told to ask the minister. Now, I get fun. You know, as Minister of Housing, you could come to me and tell me send a letter, and welfare department and some other departments say this all the time. Send a letter. A minister go to your minister to send a letter. Why should I go to a minister or anybody for that matter if my house burned down? When your house burned down, Mr. Speaker, the fire engine should come, the police and the welfare automatically. And that's the changes that we want in this country, where you should have to tell a minister, I want a house, to do what? And I refuse. If I had a fire in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, I will not call a minister, because the system should be so, and we want one of the heads, the social heads, to be brought here, because the system should be so at this time in our development. If democracy is to mean anything, a man has a fire, B or D, he should have some form of replacement. And when the fire engine turn comes up, the fire engine should bring the police, the welfare officer, and all the social services as well, so that if a person has a need, that should be given. And that's the one point. You have going to certain institutions and they tell you, send a letter, bring a letter from a minister to do what? And I have said repeatedly, the failure of the last Democratic Party is this, that as Minister of Housing, I've made the point that in every constituency, 80, and you develop in your constituency, Mr. Speaker, 80% should be for the people of your constituency, Michael Central. 80% or 90%. They brought people from all over Barbados, DLB supporters to St. George at Constant. At the end of the day, they voted for me. Why? Because they recognized that the government was doing foolishness and folly. You know? So that when MPs feel that I am only doing this for partisan thing, it makes no sense. People see through it, and you'll get no support. So that for the last 25 years, we were saying that the need fundamental change in this parliament. And this is a good beginning. There are also other changes to be made. Also other changes to be made. But I believe this is a fundamental change after adult suffrage. After adult suffrage, Mr. Speaker, this is a fundamental change, putting power back into the hands of Parliament. That a parliamentarian has to know, has to be questioned. So a minister who represents the ministry, who is in charge of his ministry, needs to know his subject. He needs to know his subject area. He needs to understand, but he's ultimately responsible for his subject area. He needs to question the permanent secretaries and the technocrats about everything. You're going to buy in the Ministry of Public Works, you're going to buy a bus or a trailer, a tractor. Have you gone out to tender? What are the tenders? And these are the things that we're going to ask. The tendership of these things, procurement in the hospital. Last government gave things to people because of patronage. And this whole thing about the fatty calf, I could not believe that in a Barbados today that we are educated, that people support a government based on their ability to give the fatty calf to their constituent. And we voted in 2008 for that nonsense. And we saw what the fatty calf did, because we could not question anything. You had a Prime Minister come here and dismiss contractors on the floor of Parliament, and nobody could say anything. These are fundamental changes, Mr. Speaker. I go on and on and speak on the things that we see from time to time. You cannot have a situation where ministers or the Crown would dispense certain patronage in his or her constituency without any questioning. We are parliamentarians, and I'm glad that the day has come. I have seen it in my own eyes, have come where we can ask questions. And also, Mr. Speaker, we will need to look at more research officers within Parliament, because in order, and I'm not focusing, because I will soon leave, but I'm not focusing on what will happen to us now. What will happen down the road for Barbados? Where are we going? In the last BLP administration, we were thinking about putting Barbados as a first world country. We had 10 years of failure. We now have to put this country back right. Put this country right in terms of not only procurement, but to ensure that every Barbadian citizen, and not only Barbados, but all residents, have the same scope as everybody else. And then I would hope that during the estimate debate, that people will be able to make suggestions, because I understand it will be going live, and that's good. It should be going televised and going live. But it was this Barbados Day Party that brought the media in. We exposed Parliament in the last session. We are going a stage further, where every Barbadian out there, the media, will be able to log in and make comments on certain things. Log in and make comments on the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of the Environment, the care of the elderly. These are fundamental things, and I have made the point that one of the things we talk about the breakdown of some law and order. It's not total breakdown, because the statistics does not point to that. And people complain about the number of murders and so on we had last month. We want to see what changes government will put in place. And we can do that now in a committee stage, where members, the Minister of the Police, the Attorney General, the Minister of Labour, should be able to point out what measures are you putting in place, not only to bring changes to the judiciary, not only to bring changes to the police and those agencies, but the social services. How are you spending your money in looking at recruitment? How are you spending your money in looking in the community area? The fundamental changes that need to be done for people on the blocks. And the reason why a number of persons have gone here is because our social services have not lived up to the expectation. It's all to say, I'm spending $5 million a year, but $5 million a year on who? And on what? People need to question these things. Now, the other thing is, Mr. Speaker, I think it should be mandatory too, that every MP should have constituency clinics. It should be mandatory for every member of Parliament, because you're paid to do that, to represent. And of course, I have always made the point, Mr. Speaker, that all politics is local. I, for the last 24, 25 years, Mr. Speaker, go into my constituency and on Thursday evening to see people. And I don't care if you're from B or D. You come to see me, you might only come to write a letter, you might only come. Some people say it's nonsense. I ain't got nothing to do, I ain't got a job. It's not only about jobs. People come to see you, to talk to you. People come to see you to find out what it is you can say in Parliament. I use that occasion to tell people, look, we are debating a bill in Parliament, come down. We're doing something, and think fundamental changes will come. And this is where you can do. Because Parliament pays for the constituency offices, for a constituency secretary, and we need to ensure that those offices within the 30 constituencies are properly manned and not only manned but appointed with the requisite technology, computers and so on. But we have change, you know. There's so much change in the world. We need to move Barbados forward. I tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the technology needs to change. Now, for the years, and I must say, I hope that the Minister of Health, when he speaks in the next debate, can tell us what changes will be made in terms of patient. Because, I mean, I'm not criticizing because people feel that when they get up and criticize, but I must ask the questions. Mr. Speaker, you go to the Ministry of Health.
Honourable, but remember that based on the proposed amendment in relation to these standard orders, you will have adequate time.
True.
Adequate time.
The question.
When the occasion arises to pose the requisite questions. I do not think that this is the opportune time to go into that realm of debate.
I'm not really.
The debate, sir, rests on the amendment to the standard orders to make provision for such.
True.
So this is not the appropriate time, sir, to pose the questions to the honourable members.
I'm not really posing the question, Mr. Speaker. I was just taking one item to say when the standard order is fully amended and approved this Parliament, we can ask a question for the Minister: what aspects are you doing in terms of record keeping? Because that is one of the fundamental changes that need to happen. I want to see what happens. So I just want to put the Minister on guard so that he can tell us what is happening. That's basically what it is. So that, Mr. Speaker, I feel that these changes are fundamental, and I want to compliment the government, but I think we need to allow the public to know what is happening. I think there's I'm surprised that the media houses have not taken up this at all, because the media always looks for fallacious things so on to comment on, but this is a fundamental change in this House of Assembly that will require tremendous change throughout in the next couple of years, and I believe we are on the right course. I want to say to support this amendment and ask that in the future we should see further development coming to the Parliament. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sat here and I listened very carefully to my colleagues, and I too want to basically support the resolution for these amendments. But it struck me when the Honourable Minister for St. George North was speaking just now, that there is in these chambers at this particular point in time, there appears to be eagerness to have an opportunity to question someone else. Now, this may be because of a lack of opposition. Not to say that the one person that we have in opposition doesn't do the best that he can. But I could tell from some of the utterances that there is this eagerness to be able to debate in a different type of way. And even though the amendments are not specifically about that in a sense, but I believe that these amendments will now satisfy that hunger in a sense that persons have the opportunity now to question other ministers about things that are happening in their ministries. And this can only be cited, Mr. Speaker, as a good thing, because as a person who studies the human being and human behavior on a regular basis, it's always good when we have the opportunity to express ourselves in the ways that we would want to. For some of the other members I know who have been through estimates and done this thing for a very long time, I'm sure that in the past, from where I stood, and I remember very clearly in 1983, I had the privilege of then taking 2 days, what seemed like an eternity of debate by the then Honourable Mr. Adams, I took that and proceeded and put it down into about 11 minutes of a song called The Black Box. And I remember that very clearly because it was a time when I really had to study what was going on in these hallowed chambers and try to condense it in a way that the rest of the public were able to grasp. And so it is a privilege for me now to be able to come and put myself in the position where people get the opportunity to ask me myself what I'm doing in my ministry. So I'm very, very happy that these amendments are coming forward. But what is more striking apart from that is that we've been talking a lot about transparency. And oftentimes when you begin to hear people talk about transparency, the fingers are often pointed at the members of Parliament. This gives the general public now an opportunity to understand how government and governance works, especially where money is concerned. Because oftentimes you will hear people make comments about the ministers themselves as being either prudent or otherwise, or being ethical or otherwise. And reality is that this now, with these amendments, gives the average person out there the opportunity to see how the system actually works, how their money is spent, what is the thought process that goes into the programs that we are going to deliver. This now begins to, in my mind, to bring the wider public more into how, why, and when monies are spent on certain programs. It's an engagement that I think for too long has been just left as another ceremonial or just one of the things that you have to do. We are now seeking to engage the public in a completely different way. And yes, the call-in programs and other things I'm sure will benefit from this also, because I am confident that whenever these estimates come along and this new way is being done, that our radio waves will be hot with debate. And I think that in 2019, and in a democracy, as everyone has been saying, that this can only be a good thing. That you engage the public more, and even your young people. Because, sir, as I mentioned earlier, I was 19 years old when I sat and watched on television the very debates that I spoke about earlier. And we've seen over a number of years that this sort of engagement, this sort of looking forward to hearing what was going to be debated at that particular time, the barbs that were going to be traded on the thing, has been eroded from the society. So I believe that with this initiative, we are seeking not only just to be transparent, but we are seeking to share what I consider to be very important and very relevant information with the persons who have voted and sent us here to represent them. This, as I said before, can only be a good thing. Yet, as we all know, as good as we may say it, there will be naysayers. And there will be persons who will find the opportunity to, or take the opportunity to say all sorts of things of what this present administration is trying to do and change, because some people will find change very difficult to deal with. And you will always have those folks who will say that it's all a sham, and I can hear the conversations all like, no. But the important thing is that this government has said from day one, through its manifesto, through the Covenant of Hope, that we are in the business of transformation, that we are in the business of doing business differently, that we are looking to the future, but we are the ones, the pioneers, if I may use that word, of this new Barbados that people are seeking to live in and to experience. And the small things sometimes get lost on people. Most people on the ground are very interested in, am I going to be able to travel again like I used to travel? Am I going to be able to buy a new home, a new car? Am I going to be able to pay my bills and all of these things? Oftentimes they do not see the work that is being done in this parliament at this time as being relevant to answering those very questions or being able to connect it to what they want. This initiative is one of those. Because if you begin to understand how monies are spent, where they are spent, who is accountable for them, then you begin to understand why such an initiative becomes very relevant to you being able to have a better standard of living in the future. And it is simply this: when accountability is placed on persons, not just one, not just the Minister of Finance or the people who work in finance, but it trickles down through the system to the heads, the ministers, the PSs, the technical people, whoever, that chain becomes a lot longer. And you would always hear a sort of a proverb that people would say, that a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And in this decision, in this new initiative, what we are seeking to do is to strengthen every link in that chain. If you want to call it a financial chain, that is what it is. We are seeking to strengthen every single link in it, so that there's prudence, so that there's transparency, and so that at the end of the day, Barbados will not find itself in a situation that we found ourselves in under a Democratic Labour Party mandate, I would say, that totally went against everything that would have happened in the past with various administrations that were in these hallowed halls. And so we're in the business now of correcting a lot of the problems and a lot of the deficiencies that crept up within the system. I am happy, and I must say, as a new minister, it will seem to most of us, if we are honest with ourselves, a little bit daunting, because for those of us who have never had to do this before, the thoughts of having to learn all of this in a short space of time and be able to stand up to the scrutiny of your colleagues and the general public, it can be a bit daunting. But life in itself is challenging. And challenges can only make you not only a better parliamentarian or a better minister or whatever, but a better person. And this is what I think is the most exciting thing about this for me as a first-time minister, is that it gives you the opportunity now to be a part of a pioneering process that says that future persons coming behind us would not at least have to face it head on for the first time, but that we are, as to use some cricket analogy, preparing a good wicket for others to bat. And so I want to give my support to this resolution. I won't take up too much time at the chamber, but suffice it to say that I support these amendments, and I really do look forward to that particular point in time when we get an opportunity to discuss what is happening in our various ministries, to say why we are doing it, and give the public a bit more information about how government works, what we are doing, and they'll have a better understanding of the part that they themselves have to play in this transformation. I thank you.
I remember if you sit there, John.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to make a short contribution to this debate. My colleagues have spoken eloquently and have covered most of the bases in relation to the amendment to the standing orders. I want to say from early that when I first entered this Holler chamber as a member of parliament in opposition, there are two things that struck me. The first one immediately was that it was so much easier, you recognize at that time, to speak on a political platform than it was to speak in this place with those on the other side sitting right in front of you. And that initially was an intimidating but an interesting experience. That was part of the socialization process within the chamber. The other thing for me was the fact that, in my view, the debates that we conducted during that time did not reach the level that I was expecting. And they did not reach a level not because those who were debating did not have the talent to do so. They didn't reach the level, in my opinion, because most of the things that we were debating did not facilitate the level of disclosure that would allow members to properly research the things that were being debated. And hence, we never got into the kind of depth and at the level of debate that I figured that this honorable chamber required. And in a lot of cases, we got notices very, very late, so there was really no time to properly prepare. And I felt at that time in opposition, I felt seriously at that time that something needed to be done about that, because it seemed to me as though the entire proceedings in this parliament were conducted with a veil of secrecy, as though everything was a top secret. And everybody was waiting for something to fall off the back of the truck. And I pledged to myself at that time that if the good Lord had given me the opportunity through the people of the city of Bridgetown to be returned to this house and to be in government, that I would try my best to make that experience better for those who were coming after me. I pledged to myself then that for the normal estimates debate, that I would not have waited for whoever was shadowing any ministry that I was assigned to say that something fell off the truck. I was prepared to take the ministerial brief that is prepared for ministers and give it to the opposition person who is shadowing me. And I was prepared to do that because I felt then, and I do feel now, that there is nothing in my ministry, if I was assigned a ministry, or nothing in the estimates that I should not be prepared to defend and to speak on with confidence. The other thing, I always heard when I was on that side, on the opposition side, from the government side, that the opposition had no ideas or suggestions or anything. I made several suggestions within these chambers. They said they were noted, but no, they never went anywhere. And I believe that if we had a debate that allowed people to research properly, that people could come here really to debate, that if I was presenting a paper on something within the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and I had people on the other side who really were prepared, and they came at me, and they had ideas that I believe would have improved or would improve what it is I was trying to bring to this house, that it could only be for the benefit of the people of Barbados. And I felt strongly about that. And so even now, when I'm acting as a leader of this house, I try my best to ensure that the leader of the opposition gets as early a notice as possible as I can give him in relation to what we're going to debate. And so I believe that we can even do better, but I think that is the direction that we need to be going in. And so I welcome the amendment to the standing orders to do exactly what it is that we want to do. And I'm not saying that in any flippant way. These amendments, they are not in isolation. They are not dropping out of the sky. This is part of what we said in opposition that we would do when we formed the government of this country. And all of these ideas are embedded in the Covenant of Hope and in the manifesto of the Barbados Labour Party. We said that we were going to be transformational. And we have started the process of transformation. And I will tell you how. We said that we were going to be transparent in government. And we have started that process. And I would say that in my view, there cannot be any transformation in this country unless there is transformation of, first of all, of the minds, unless there's transformation of the systems that we hold dearly to, unless there's transformation in archaic legislation that has held us hostage for several years. They must go hand in hand. We bring transformation in terms of the legislation, the things that we are trying to do. The whole process of digitization within cabinet, within parliament, within commerce, within industry, these are the things that will take us forward. We said in terms of transparency that we would have declared our assets, and we have done so. That's what we said. We said that we will engage the public in things that we are doing, and we have done so. This is the next step in the process of transparency, which will then facilitate further the process of transformation. How is that? So, I sat as an opposition MP, and as been said this morning by the Honourable Prime Minister, you go through the estimates process, and if you are like me, you're overwhelmed with all of the figures. But the truth is, in terms of drilling down to the things that really matter, sometimes we spent 5 days in here and spent very few hours getting to the nitty-gritty of the estimates. So for me, it was not really estimates. We were not debating estimates. We were making speeches. And sometimes for me, the speeches were meaningless because there was no connectivity between the speeches that were being made and the estimates of revenue and expenditure that were being presented. And so this now gives us the opportunity to correct that. And the fact that 6 ministries, at least, according to the amendments, will have to be discussed and debated in here, I welcome that. And I dare say the Honourable Prime Minister is not present, but if my ministry, Health and Wellness, happens to be one of those 6 in the first going down, I welcome that too. And I like the idea, Mr. Speaker, in the amendments, the fact that some of the ministers of cabinet who sit in the other place can now be questioned, can now be called to account because we are accountable. We are accountable to our program, for our programs. Our technical people, sometimes you have people in here, even as a minister, and they don't pretend to be a guru on anything. So let me speak as Minister of Health and Wellness during estimates debates. I am happy to know that I can go into the well of this house with my technical people who are better versed than I in their areas of responsibility, so that we could then collectively represent the Ministry of Health and Wellness and account to the people of Barbados for what it is that we are doing. And I say to my colleagues, all of us, we have one opposition member at this point in time. There will be a time when there will be more. But we must never be afraid of being questioned by the opposition, because that is what they're there for, and that is how the system is supposed to work. And all it says to us is not to be afraid of the questions, not to be afraid of the change that is coming. Let that change and let those questions help us to be better prepared for what we're doing. Because if we are better prepared for what we're doing, we can do the job better, we will deliver to the people better. And all of that could only be for the benefit of the good people of this country. So I embrace the amendments to the standing orders. I look forward to the new way of doing business. And I hope that all of us in here at the end of the day would enjoy doing what we are doing much better. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I too will wish to be making my contribution in relation to the Standing Orders Committee and the report that is before this Honourable Chamber. I want to reiterate that politics is by the people, of the people and for the people, and that is what this Barbados Labour Party stands for. There is a new dispensation in this country, in this new year of 2019, and I believe that new systems and new rules will make a tremendous difference in bringing the public on board to be sensitized, to be educated and aware of whatever is happening in this honourable chamber, because this is the chamber to which all Barbadians look up to, the leaders, their contributions, and they want to be able to take a part in whatever is happening in here, because they are the stakeholders, they are the taxpayers, they are the ones who are to be nurtured. And so I have a keen interest in being a part of this. We know, Mr. Speaker, of the confidence and the trust that the people of Barbados placed in this administration with all 30, no -1, still say 30, and we want to uplift and fulfill those pledges that we made to the people of Barbados. My honourable colleague, sir, the honourable member for the city, he spoke about the project we did, the name escapes me now. You mentioned it just now. The booklet we had before the election. Covenant of Hope. Covenant of Hope. I don't know how we could forget that, but there's so many things I'm reading now, and the vision is unfolding. And I want to say, sir, that the Covenant of Hope helped to be used as a barometer to bring us to what we were able to present to the public of Barbados in our manifesto, because it has always been the mantra of the Barbados Labour Party for all its existence of over 80 years, that the manifesto is a social contract. And whatever pledges we could not fulfill then, sir, we were able to bring back a document to show the promises we made and the achievements that we were able to make, and we explained the reason why some were not fulfilled. Most often times it was to do with the lack of funding and so on. And so today I am proud to be a member of this honourable chamber, because we stand still as our forefathers started with our great national hero, the excellent Grantley Adams, about good governance in the judiciary, in the social sectors, in education, transport, in the Ministry of the Environment with the garbage collection, and of course making Barbados green again. We have suffered water woes. Our roads have been in a terrible state and still are. Agriculture, housing, youth and their development, in the crime and violence. We pledge to the people of Barbados, sir, that we will uphold these tenets, these values, these morals, these pledges, and we will work towards the achievement of whatever we had presented to the people, and we know it will take time to be able to achieve them all, but that is what change is about. Change always creates challenges for people, because they're not so sure if the change will work for them. But once you have your ideals set up and your objectives properly outlined, that fear that will emanate from us will be allayed. The excitement will continue for those who are excited about it, and of course the element of trust will make a difference. So we pledge to the people that there will be this transparency, the good governance, the accountability. There will be equity across the breadth and length of Barbados, despite color, class, creed, or whatever the situation. And after 21 downgrades, Mr. Speaker, and after year, and out of the General's report that spoke to mismanagement in a way that it almost made some of us become challenged in a way that we could not understand why the questions were being asked and no answers were being given to help to make us aware as to what is happening, what plans are there for us in the various constituencies, because Barbados became a set of constituencies for those who were on the government side in that Democratic Labour Party, and all of us on the other side, sir, were ostracized when we made queries. When we wrote officially, letters were brought in here and read out, and I was glad for that, because my constituents understood that I was writing on their behalf, and on behalf, sir, of other persons, Mr. Speaker, sir, whose constituents came to me as well. Because when constituents here, whichever other honourable member is responsible for the trust loans, they don't come to the one in their community, they go, or their constituency, they go to the honourable member for St. George South. And when they hear about health, they go to the honourable member for the city, even though they're not living there. And we embrace them, because at the end of the day, it's one Barbados. And people have issues, they do not always get the direct connection, but they come to our constituency clinics, and I want to lay the affairs of the honourable member for St. George North. We do hold constituency clinics. It is just that our program is so heavy now with the birth program and the other policies and programs we're trying to unravel as a result of the golden initiatives that were identified in our manifesto and the pledges we made to our people in this country, that it has slowed down some of us, because we go through till 11 o'clock at night some nights, Mr. Speaker, sir. Cabinet sometimes close through till 11 o'clock. And therefore, if you have a clinic plan for 4 or so in the evening, anticipating, we have to do the government's big list first, and then treat to other matters. And therefore, we're not always able to get there, but the members in our constituency will take the telephone calls, and people call us in our homes. I do not know, and I do not believe that any of the honourable members in this Barbados Labour Party government will want to change any phone number like some people did from the other side when the government was in their favour, that you cannot contact them after election. I will be disappointed, I will be upset, and you know, sir, I will make a fuss, because we've pledged to the people we will be there for you. This is unity. We're looking at mission critical, and therefore your business is ours. The matters you have, refer to us, and we are willing to work with you. And so, Mr. Speaker, today we have come with this standing order committee and the kind of amendments we will wish to make. And I know, sir, as we speak, almost every other person will be on board, because change is inevitable in these times. We have seen this world unfold in a way where we can sit in our living rooms and see what's happening in any part of the world. We are able to remain in our homes and pay our bills. We remain in our homes, and we can face time and all the other terms that the young people use, sir, through the various aspects of the technology, because the world is changing. So why must we remain so archaic with what we do and keep those who should know and those with whom we should be connecting, who have gone out there and worked with us to make changes in this society and to do them successfully? Why must we not be going forward with the change? And so this government, sir, with only a few months under its belt, we have not even had as many months as it would take for a baby to be developed and given birth. But however, we've been able to make some achievements, and that is the reason why we're going to continue to include the change and walk through it with the people, to bring them on board, so then the changes are made, they are with us, and they can understand. And we will hold our branch meeting as usual. They have one on Sunday. There are other honourable members who had last week, sir. There are others who will have their meetings to keep connected with the people, because politics is about the people, for the people, and it's by the people who have gone out resoundingly and voted for us and for others who would have been a part of this whole vanguard in the political arena. And as a result of our mission critical project, sir, that we pledged to the people of Barbados, the South Coast project is beginning to come to a level that is acceptable, and businesses have been opened again, and the beach has been opened. That is what I call working for the people, because people matter in this exercise. I know that 2 garbage trucks were brought in to help to eliminate. Yes, there are still challenges, but the challenges were obtaining from over the last 10 years, and nothing happened except millions of dollars went down the drain that cannot be accounted for, and instead a 6-story building up in Vaucluse that the carpet is in it now, so the civil servants are saying we are not even going in there because we're going to get respiratory problems over time if the place is not properly cleaned. But that is standing there like a sore thumb, and you can't get the accountability for it. I want the honourable member for St. Michael East, bring the facts and the figures to the country. The taxpayers' money must be spoken for. They must be accounted for. And those who breach the rules with those funds, if they cannot be found, you know, Mr. Speaker, what my thought is. And you know I've said it more than anybody else in here. Find somebody to answer the questions for the taxpayers' money, lock up who is wrong. But the investigation has to happen. I know the honourable member for Christchurch West is trying his best with the transportation, and I can speak of what's happening in Sturgis, but it happened since 2014 when all the buses were taken off our route, too many buses. Now the Zadards are wreaking havoc in there, have no permission. But the minister, the honourable minister and his team, the honourable member for St. Lucie as well, they are trying to ease the situation. But I believe that this kind of exercise that we will obtain and work with here will make a difference in bringing the messages to the people to change it. The plan from the Mission Critical for our polyclinics to be opened, 2 of them at least for start, because we know we are going through a serious economic crisis and that we have got some pledges. And I know that the honourable member for the city has come forward, and we are stepping on the doorsteps for our polyclinics to be open after hours to take some of the weight of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. That is what you call making plans and pledges to the people and trying to fulfill them despite the harsh economic situation, sir. Road maintenance. I see the highway has been paved. Huddersfield turning all the way down to Warrens. I went with my supervisor from the north only on Friday, sir, and I managed to get some potholes closed off. I still want the King Garden Road done, but I know there are challenges with money, but the people of St. Thomas have been assured that road will get fixed. My 2-year-old car is racking in the steering wheel because of the bad roads. But we know someday, sometime soon, we will make it and achieve that goal. Mr. Speaker, sir, the small loans and the projects to develop entrepreneurship. When people sit and hear us and see us in this section of this honourable chamber, face to face with the civil servants and the television and the rest of the public, Mr. Speaker, sir, people will get to know the rest of what is happening. We pledge that University of the West Indies, the fees will be paid for students, particularly those poor people's students who could not enter because there was no money, or those students whose parents were struggling and wanted to continue but had to stop because an uncaring government pushed poor people's children out through the door to deprive them of an opportunity. But they got their opportunity because some of them had 2 and 3 degrees that they did for free. This government wants to speak to those issues, sir, whenever those estimates are ready, that we can let the public know what our achievements are and how we are going forward with the money that is being allocated ministry by ministry by ministry, project by project by project. Mr. Speaker, sir, even the court system that is clogged, we were given a bad hand in that. Thousands of cases unattended to. But thank God a project is coming again, because we pledge that we will give judges and others in the judiciary to minimize what is happening in this country. The boosting of our foreign reserves, I spoke about that already. Mr. Speaker, sir, the technology and its infusion. And I thank God for what we call EduTech. That is the foundation for preparing our people, starting in our schools, for the community technology programs that were done before 2008 and continued, that our people can come and be technologically savvy to be able to be current in what is going on. So we are looking at cabinet and making this thing a whole paperless approach, because the more paper you have, you see me, sir, the paper, I'm learning the technology too in my old age because I have to become current. And the change I would have been a little timid about, but I'm getting there with the help of my colleagues who are better off and the other persons in the government entities who are helping to take us along step by step. And I'm saying the change that will take place here a few weeks from now is going to be a part of what is happening. We got pensions increased, Mr. Speaker. I have to touch those things because we need to speak about them and let the people know more will come. For 9 years, not a cent in increase in salaries. That too we will speak about because we have pulled the stakeholders from the social partnership back into the fold to let them know we will let you be by your sides, that whatever we do, you're integral to this exercise. That is what you call, sir, good governance. I am not going to mention much more, sir, except to say, sir, that I tendered 9 parliamentary questions, sir, between 2013 and 2018, and they are a record of this distinguished chamber, sir. Not one single. There were some between the period 2008 to 2013, and I got 2 little answers. One for the summer camps, where they spent $3 million per year for catering alone to their students and their friends. And the camps fell apart. So for catering alone, it was $6 million overall for everything else. That was one, and then the one to do with the Freedom Village at Rock Hall. Not another 2008 to 2013, but the 9 are here, sir. There are records here. Where questions were asked, sir, about the IC Bridge project and that IBDB project. We have so many families that are impoverished, sir. We will speak about here in this chamber, sir, when that time comes. Because poor people must not be left out of the loop. Because when you're poor and you're hungry and you can't feed your children, that is another challenge for us and for our society. Nobody in Barbados should go to sleep poor. Thank God for those agencies that come on board and feed our people in the various communities. And I will not call the names of those agencies. That time will come. I asked about the Transport Authority. I asked about Allen View in St. Thomas, where there was a relaxation I asked for here of the tax bills, because persons in there have spots but they can't touch them to do anything because of the Environmental Protection Zone Act that has caused them to be able to go into limbo. Not an answer, Mr. Speaker. I asked questions, sir, about the consultant who was supposed to be working with the Ministry of Education, almost $8,000 a month, to look at bullying and children at risk. And today we see children at risk on the road. 8 years later, 10 years later, wreaking havoc because no official report, according to my investigation, has been delivered to guide this government. What are the issues with the young people? Beyond what we know or what we investigate, that we can get that record. That is the kind of madness that we are talking about, that we want to have it shut down one time. And I say to the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, these officers here, these ministers in government have got to be accountable to the people. And I've known of times before, sir, and you know, and all of us know, where ministers were, the portfolios were taken away. I'm not saying it's because they didn't produce, but for what reason, that opportunity is still there. We are here to serve the people of Barbados, and therefore each of us has taken on that responsibility and that pledge. We will do the best we can, despite whatever the circumstances, because people matter. People first, and if we're going to do this together and leave no one behind, then all of us are accountable and we shall perform in here. Some of us are brighter than others, but I should say some of them, because I'm on my way. No, I don't care how bright I am. I will represent the interests of the people of St. Thomas who voted resoundingly. And therefore, we have pledged to look after the needs of Barbados, to take it to the next level. And we always talk about Barbados that was punching above its weight in 2006, 7, and 8. I know we have a Barbados that we have to make sure that we go behind and clean up and dust off and do so many things to bring it to the level that we know it should be at. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am appalled of those unfair practices in the Auditor General's report. I want to encourage my honourable members and colleagues here, please let us work with the civil servants to fulfill those projects in our mandate, and to fulfill those projects that at the end of the day we stamp out some of the poverty. We stamped out some of the disorderly behavior among our youth, that our prisoners are well cared for, as I know they are. Some of them are better cared for than those persons in Barbados who haven't committed a crime, because some people don't have any food to eat, but they are incarcerated, therefore they must be fed. They're human beings. I want my colleagues to continue to pursue, despite the late nights. They will have to forget the wives and the partners, most of them are male, sir, and do the government's business, because we have pledged to the people of Barbados. That's why 30 seats were given to us, including that of the leader of the opposition, and he has the culture of the Barbadian, or the Barbados Labour Party in him, that I'm sure that he, as a Christian man and a bishop, will do his best in his neck of the woods, and we will not treat him, Mr. Speaker, sir, like how the Democratic Labour Party treated us. No roads, no jobs, even if it came to the bushing, no nothing. The honourable member can rest assured that the people in St. Michael West were our people before they were his, and we're going to look after him in the same way, and he will get a chance to ask whatever question he so chooses to, and once the Lord is here, we will be able to respond to them. And I'm using the Lord a lot because I'm talking about him as a spiritual man, Mr. Speaker, sir. I want to say, finally, Mr. Speaker, I am happy for the opportunity for civil servants to be intimately involved in what will take place here in another few weeks. I have been coming to this honourable chamber, sir, since 1976. And I always saw the chairs here, sir, over to, I would call it the north or the left when you enter this honourable chamber, sir, with civil servants all over. And that ante-room with civil servants in there, ministers made and parliamentarians made queries of those permanent secretaries and staff, and they will come with a file and they will be able to find some answers and information from in that ante-room, and the clerks and so on and the marshals will hand the note to the respective ministers, so that that person will be able to give answers to what would have been discussed in the budget, in the estimates, and whatever debating activities, sir, took place. And then between 2008 and 2018, Mr. Speaker, you will never see a civil servant sitting in that gallery or that section of the gallery, sir, to be able to inform the civil servants, particularly the permanent secretaries and their deputies. They are the ones who are responsible for the purses of the respective ministries. So we have to work with them to make sure that they give us the guidance, and I pray that all of them will continue to give proper guidance, because it will be them who will get surcharged if anything goes wrong with the government's money, not a minister. And therefore I am happy to learn that the civil servants, meaning the permanent secretaries, will be a part of this cohesive effort to be able to let the people of Barbados know we've got projects, we've got policies, we've got programs, the funding will be made available. All these individuals or groups within the respective ministries will be an integral part of sharing and letting the rest of Barbados know what plans we have for them. It is about time, having suffered for 10 years, sir, that something good can happen for the people of Barbados, and not just those who live in St. Philip or St. Lucie or sections of St. Michael that were members of Parliament, but across the board, all Barbadians must benefit by the projects that will unfold through this Barbados Labour Party government, because we are about people and looking after their needs and empowering them. And so, Mr. Speaker, I am happy for the privilege. I've got people in the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, especially our aged, who are suffering in a phenomenal way that I can't even speak about it here, and we cannot eliminate those issues over a short period of time, but with time, working with other agencies and ministries in inter-ministry meetings with the Ministry of Health and so on and so forth, we can make a difference and a dent in what is happening. We can do it with the Ministry of Housing and Lands, make a dent. There are too many people who are homeless in this country that we inherited, and I believe there will be more that will come on stream because of the challenges at this time. But the ministers here, we have pledged through cabinet, and so we will do our best under the circumstances, but we are accountable to the people of Barbados, and we will work together as a team to eliminate some of the issues one by one, but at the end of the day, to make Barbadians feel there's this element of trust still, there's this element of accountability There's this element of good governance, as you can see and feel it, Mr. Speaker, sir, and you can rest assured. You may not be able, sir, to speak from this honourable chamber in the way that we do, but you too, well, if the honourable member for St. Michael West is going to be recognized and his people looked after, sir, what about you? So I'm saying, sir, if you will allow me to say that, sir, I don't mean to be offensive in any way, sir, but we have to look after every parliamentarian and every constituency, because at the end of the day, there will be no two Barbados, as was the trek that we were going down for 10 years, one Barbados, one people, and together, once we facilitate their needs in the best way, and we offer the services, and we work with them and the interagencies as well as the other stakeholders in this society, Barbados will not only be a productive country again, it will be a safe institution, not only for Barbados, but the visitors who come among us. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to say how indeed overjoyed I am, and I am not afraid of change. We are not afraid of change. The change is inevitable. It is how we handle that change and keep people with us, holding them hand by hand and letting them know what we are doing. And the media, I am sure, will help us to be able to achieve that goal. And it is with this vision that this Barbados Labour Party came with as a government to be so successful, creating history more than once. At the same time, we will continue to work with the public of Barbados, and we shall be accountable for every last cent that will be spent, because it will be spent in the interest of Barbadians, but it will be above board to make sure that we can account for any and everything that is done, because Barbados belongs to all of us. And so, Mr. Speaker, I strongly support the amendments in the Standing Orders Committee, and I trust that Barbadians will come on board and be an integral part of whatever we do to make this place the change agent in this part of the hemisphere, joining with our other brothers in the Caribbean who have gone this route and so successfully as well. And I wish to thank you, sir, for giving me the moment to express my concerns. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't detain the chamber long, but I do want to participate in this debate because it's so essential to the democracy of Barbados. From the time I entered politics, and one of the reasons why I entered politics was because I felt it was important that Barbados works for everyone. And in order for that to occur, the country must operate well. And that means our democracy must be strong, it must be healthy, and it must allow everybody to participate. And I believe sincerely, Mr. Speaker, as you do, that unless good people come to office to do good things, to ensure that the country works for everyone, it will not happen by happenstance. That if we do not guard a democracy, the rogues and the vagabonds will get in, and those rogues and vagabonds will destroy our democracy and therefore destroy the lives of people. So the work that we do here every day is important to every single Barbadian. It reminds me very much of a quotation by James Bovard, and that's why I feel so passionate about it. Because if you do not guard your democracy, then people can be harmed. James Bovard said, democracy must be something more than two wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. It has to exceed that. That you cannot have a situation where the people who govern a country do so not in the interest of the masses, but do so in their own interests, and where they sit and carve up the sheep for dinner because they've come to office to look out for themselves. And one of the reasons why I'm associated with this party is because it is committed. There is a commitment to the improvement of Barbadian lives by improving governance, improving our economic management, improving our social operations. And this is why it is important that the democracy, all aspects, it cannot just be words that we speak on a platform. It can't be something that we put in our manifesto. It cannot just be something we put in a covenant of hope. But we have to be committed enough to take those things and translate them into real action. And if you look at what the Barbados Labour Party administration has done since coming to office, it has put into action that which it has promised. That what has gone on in Barbados must never happen again. Nobody should be able to come to office and take this country for a ride. But in order for us to arrive at that good governance, it takes not just legislation, it takes not just people with a good mind and a good heart, it calls for the engagement of the citizen in the process. So one of the things that we are seeking to do as an administration is to be able to create those avenues through which proper participation can take place, proper accountability can take place, so that people can have the assurance that their affairs will be well managed. Because one of the tasks of this generation of politicians is that we have to rebuild the trust between the governed and the governors. And if we are to achieve that, there are certain things that we have to do. And we have already started. Mr. Speaker, one of the first things we were asked to do as representatives and parliamentarians was to declare our assets. And every one of us sat down, wrote down everything we had, and put it in an envelope and submitted it. Because we were leading from the front. We were not talking integrity. We were not railing against corruption. We were walking the talk by doing what we needed to do to set the example. The next thing we did was the integrity legislation. And that integrity legislation sought to put in place the elements that would allow us to hold accountable those who have opportunity and access through their positions and their engagements to the resources of the public. And it is so important that this legislation becomes a part not just of our statute books, but what it asks for must become a part of our political culture. That when in years to come people speak about politicians, they speak about them with respect. They speak about them as role models that they can hold up to their children and to the generations coming behind. That they can exhibit the trust in the governance which they bring. And Barbadians understand this because Barbadians decided that after the last 10 years, they recognize that they must take charge of their democracy, and that is why we ended where we did on May 24th. Our intention as a government is to never let down the people of Barbados. They must never regret that vote that they took on May 24th. And with every fiber of our being, Mr. Speaker, our intention is to so conduct ourselves, to so manage public affairs, that people never regret the decision they made on May 24th. But the Barbados Labour Party did not stop there. We had the Declaration of Assets, we had the integrity legislation, and then a week or so ago, we laid in this Honourable Chamber the public finance legislation. And what this sought to do was to give teeth to the entire practice of how every aspect of our finances are managed on a day-to-day basis, holding every single level that engages accountable. And I want to sincerely applaud our leader, our members of Parliament, and the public service for this piece of legislation that helps us to hold people accountable. And today, we're looking at changing the standing orders to take another major step forward in relation to how we give an account of that which we do. And why is it necessary? Mr. Speaker, one of the things I've discovered by engaging the constituency is that people don't seem to understand that the government is not necessarily the people we elect in office. The government is not necessarily the group we elect in office plus the civil service. But rather, the government of Barbados is really the citizens in their collective voice. That as citizens we've come together and we have determined that there are a number of things that must take place for us as a collective, and that collectively we have a responsibility to be able to give the resources that allow those collective things to be done. Whether we're talking about our schools or roads, whether we're talking about our airports, whether we're talking about health or education. Things that we as individuals cannot do on our own, we have to do collectively, and government is simply the expression of all citizens together acting in one collective voice. And that we, the parliamentarians, are merely the servants of the people, and therefore have a responsibility to the people for every single thing that we do. That we're not lords on high. That when we do things for our constituents, it's not some blessed gift that we have given to them, but rather that we have honored the charge that has been laid on us to ensure that their needs are met and to have full discharge of our responsibility to them, and that they judge us on that basis. Now, Bernard Shaw made a statement. I think it is worth our hearing it. Bernard Shaw said, "Democracy is a device that ensures we shall be governed no better than we deserve." That citizens deserve the government which they have chosen. So one of the things I want to see is that as a Barbados Labour Party administration, that we continue to govern so well because Barbadians deserve it, and they recognize that they deserve better, and that's why they made the change. I also want Barbadians to understand that the money that is collected is theirs. It is not a debt or a bill that they owe to government. It is monies that they willingly invest into their future, and they have to expect that people will spend it properly. That when we set aside $180 million to do roads, that they have a right to know which roads we're going to do. They have a right to know about the contracts. They have a right to know the process by which we have arrived at doing it. That people have a right to know why we made a choice between this program in education versus this program in health, why we chose to do this one rather than that one. The people have a right to know. They have a right to know that if we send out for equipment and we say that the equipment costs $2 million, Mr. Speaker, they have a right to ask why it cost $2 million, and was there no other option as to where it could be gotten? Were there better prices that we could have? Had we been able to do that in the last administration, we would not have a government coming here with projects and everything costing $500 million. A new sugar factory, $500 million. A new this or a new that, $500 million. And not a man to question. Cahill was over $700 million. Not a man to question or hold them accountable. But because the people have a right to know, the fact that we are putting in place legislation where we can be asked, questioned, challenged, tested, to me is a wonderful, wonderful step forward, and I want to congratulate the government, I want to congratulate the AG, I want to congratulate the Prime Minister, and I want to congratulate the people of Barbados that our democracy has reached a stage where we can step to this point and do something that ordinarily a lot of other government administrations would not do. I want to congratulate on that matter. I believe that every citizen that we've spent the time educating, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, making sure that they know how to read and write and add and count and spell, how to reason, how to be creative. We've given them information that they can go on to do their CXCs, they can go on and do CAPE, they can go on and do university. They can go on and do their masters and their PhDs, that we've educated them and we must treat them like educated people and tell them how we have spent their money, because it is their business and they have a right to know. And I am looking forward, Mr. Speaker, to those debates. I'm looking forward to our being able to lay out before people what we've done and why we've done it. And you know what is a benefit to that, Mr. Speaker? There are a lot of wicked people in this world. And sometimes in politics, people are taught, win by any means necessary, even if you got to lie. Even if you have to take a truth and distort it. Even if you have to mamaguy the population. Even if you have to use their own ignorance against them, just so long as you get in the seat. You don't have to care what you mash up to get it done. And we've seen enough of that. And that is why people are wary of politics and wary of politicians. Why they don't trust us. Because our motive, they suspect the motives of people who practice that type of politics. I believe there must come a time, Mr. Speaker, when people have to be so deeply engaged in looking at what is done in their name, that haven't been given the education that they can engage in proper dialogue, they can engage in proper investigation, that we cannot come and mamaguy people, but rather we can engage them intelligently and speak about our programs, speak about our initiatives, give an account for how we've spent their money, share with them our vision for the future, talk with them as to how we will get there, and have the confidence that the people we've educated will engage us, will understand, and can give an informed yea or nay to that which we put before them. Sir, that's when our democracy would have grown up. And I love the idea that we are reaching that place. Abe Lincoln said that he was a firm believer in people. He said if people were given the truth, they can be depended on to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts. He said they can be depended on in any national crisis. And sir, today the crisis that we face, we owe it to the people to share with them fully and completely where we are, what we've done, what needs to be done. Because as we share the crisis of our journey, and as we speak to them and engage them and say, listen, this is what needs to happen. This is why you need to hold that pain. This is how we're going to get out from where we are. This is how this project is going to help us to arrive at the destination. As we explain, as we talk it through, as we answer the questions which they raise and they understand that which we say, we can depend on them to play their part. And sir, I want to commend Barbadians. One of the things I've always admired about them, and I trust will always remain a part of our political culture, is that in Barbados we've always done things in a peaceful way. That we've always dealt with our democracy in a very stable, mature manner. That even when we vex, we do not resort to a level of political violence and civil war, but rather we quietly make our determinations, and when we're ready, we go to that box and we put that vote. I pray that no administration will ever frustrate the Barbadian people again, as had happened in the last 10 years. And I pray that the people will journey with us. I want to be able to see that when we're having the debate on the estimates, that thousands of Barbadians engage, whether online, in the gallery, and that they follow that debate carefully so that they understand why and how their money is being spent, and that they engage us in discussion in the communities, at the branch meetings, in town halls, that they engage us on the radio, in social media, so that at all times they know that their money is well spent. Sir, this will mean for Barbados that as Barbadians transition onto that type of civic engagement, as they transition into that political behavior, that we will move away from the politics of voting for somebody because they buy you a drink. That we'll move away from the politics of, I'm going to vote for you because, man, you could crack a joke. But rather they will take seriously the governance of their lives, and by engaging us in this wonderful exercise of examining our estimates, holding people publicly accountable, that we will transition to a more mature way of evaluating good governance, and that never again in this country will we ever take good governance for granted, but rather we will hold it as precious, and that the people will constantly signal by their vote that they will reward good governance. And it is our intention as an administration to always give Barbadians good governance, that they never have cause to feel disappointed in us, never have cause to turn away in disgust, but rather that when they examine us, they will not find us wanting and will find us worthy of being returned. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make my contribution in this very important debate on a resolution to approve the report of the Standing Orders Committee. Mr. Speaker, this resolution and debate today marks yet another significant piece of legislation, resolution that this new administration has brought within the first 8 months of this Parliament. This is an extremely important step which this Barbados Labour Party government is making in terms of transparency and accountability of the elected members of this Parliament to the people who elected us and who we serve. This is being done, sir, and the significance of this is even greater by a party that won all the seats, that got 75% of the votes cast. In other words, it's not being done, sir, by a party that barely won the election. as has been said earlier in this debate, another government may very well, or another administration may very well say, look, we don't have to account. We have a massive vote of confidence by the people. So, you know, we're going to do what we wish. We don't have any parliamentary opposition. We won all the seats. I mean, we have the Honourable Leader of the Opposition there, and we could have ignored that position. Not this government, led by the Honourable Prime Minister, who must be given tremendous credit for insisting that this be done. Another aspect in our reporting, in our submitting ourselves to the public of Barbados, to the voters of Barbados, to the citizenry of this country, both here in Barbados and beyond, in terms of our governance, in terms of our mechanisms for treating towards our people, in terms of involving our people in aspects of our governance. This is a far cry, sir, from the previous parliament in which I sat as a first-time member, along with the Honourable Member for St. George South, who spoke earlier in this debate, the Honourable Member for the City spoke earlier, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East, and of course the other more senior members than we were and than we are, who still sit in this parliament. They would all tell you, sir, as I would, how we were treated in this parliament. The Honourable Member for St. George South spoke about it earlier on. How you lay parliamentary questions, as the Honourable Member for St. Thomas did on numerous occasions, concerning her constituency and the ministries that she shadowed, and they went unanswered. I too, sir, laid 2 parliamentary questions which were never addressed. I brought a private member's bill, sir, on disabilities legislation, and that was in March 2015, a whole 3 years before Parliament dissolved itself, and it was never addressed, sir. No date set aside to debate this bill. It was like if we were not even outside cousins. I wouldn't even want to say that. It was worse than that, when all 30 of us came in here by the same method, the voice and the vote of the people. They made much sport of us, sir. Just laughed at you. You know, it was absolutely appalling, the treatment that opposition MPs received by a government. And the only difference between us sitting over here and over there, sir, as you well know, sir, was 39 votes in your constituency, sir. Less than a busload, transport busload of people. And that is the attitude that the Democratic Labour Party government treated the people of Barbados, sir. Not us, sir, because we only stand for the elected, the people who voted for us in our constituency. So that's how they treated to the people of this country, sir. There was a case, sir, where the then Minister of Finance, as he admitted, sir, because he apologized to the Parliament, misled Parliament intentionally. Misled Parliament, sir, on an issue relating to a statutory corporation, where I said that the last annual report was in 2010, and he got up, sir, holding a piece of paper saying that he has the 2016 or 2015 annual report, I think it was, sir, holding in his hand. And when I checked, of course, I double-checked, sir, that was not the case. When I wrote the statutory corporation in question, the response I got under the direction of the Minister of Agriculture, who thankfully, due to the Honourable Member for St. Michael for St. Philip West will never see the inside of this parliament again. Under his St. Philip West, yeah. Minister of Agriculture, then Minister of Agriculture.
Yeah.
St. Philip West, thankfully, due to the Minister of Agriculture, the honourable member for the present member for St. Philip West would never see the inside of, sorry, the honourable member for St. Philip South, the present Minister of Agriculture. That Minister of Agriculture in the previous administration would never see the inside of this parliament again. Under his direction, I was written saying that that was a matter of the Official Secrets Act, whether an annual report had been laid in Parliament. Now, how could the issue of whether an annual report of a statutory corporation funded by the taxpayers of Barbados be a matter of official secrecy, sir, when the reports have to be laid in this Parliament, are subjected to parliamentary scrutiny and all of that? But that was the extent that the Democratic Labour Party administration went towards hiding their dark and ignoble deeds. And as has been said by members on this side, including the Honourable Prime Minister here today, if we had had transparency and accountability, if we had had what this report, this Standing Orders Committee report is about, you could imagine, sir, that Barbados would not be in the position of bankruptcy, into moral political decadence, callousness and incompetence that it was on May the 24th, 2018, sir. But that is a fact. But this government is about governing with openness, transparency and accountability, sir. And that is why all of the cabinet ministers, sir, have declared their assets and liabilities and submitted other information which the cabinet secretary is holding, sir, as has been told in this parliament before, subject to the commission which will be established under the Integrity in Public Life Act, which is before the Select Committee of Parliament to come out of there in the next few months. As the Honourable Attorney General has said. That is why, sir, this cabinet has agreed to the establishment of People's Committees, People's Assemblies, sir, chaired by the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, sir, with town hall meetings to get the public's opinion now on the way forward for these people's assemblies to start within 2 months' time. I am advised by the Honourable Member. That is why, sir, none of us, cabinet ministers, are afraid or perturbed in any one bit. In fact, we look forward to it, sir, with tremendous pleasure, to being questioned by our colleagues, both in cabinet and our other parliamentary colleagues, on aspects of our ministry, on matters that relate to particular members' constituencies' needs. This is what democracy is about at the highest level. And this is the type of policy initiative, parliamentary reform, that ought to have taken place long time ago. If not, as has been said earlier in this debate, sir, Parliament becomes irrelevant and loses contact with the day-to-day lives of our constituents and the people who reside in Barbados. Very few committees met in the last term of this Parliament, sir. I was on a committee that met once in the 5 years, 3 months, sir. Once. An afternoon, nothing came out of it. It was to meet again, sir. I think that was about in year 3, never met again in another 2 years. the Committee of Privileges, sir, and was an absolute waste of time under the last administration. Report of the then Speaker, sir, and his infelicities with clients' funds, sir, and no report before Parliament. Public Accounts Committee meeting to investigate the illegal transfer of funds on the building of two complexes, sir, which we went through a couple months ago, and no report laid in Parliament, not for want of trying by the then leader of the opposition, the now Prime Minister, Honourable Prime Minister of Barbados, sir, but by obstacles put in the way by the then government to the detriment of the people. And now, of course, the report revealed in this Parliament all kind of infelicities, millions of dollars gone through the Edos, and the people of Barbados want to know and understand fully how Barbados became bankrupt last May, such that a foreign debt could not be paid. Where the money gone? And all of that was because of a government that felt it was high and mighty, that felt it was unaccountable, and that, in one word, sir, I regret saying, but I have to speak the truth in here, sir, was lawless. Well, sir, that is not this government, sir. Under this report, as has been heard, in the next 2-3 weeks, sir, not only ministers would have to be sit in the well of this Parliament and be questioned, but the finance officers in their ministry, in other words, their permanent secretaries, their parliamentary secretaries, if they have parliamentary secretaries, their accounting officers, their other technical officers, come and be questioned on different aspects of the monies that your ministry, through you, is asking this Parliament, and by extension the people of Barbados, the taxpayers of this country, to approve over the next financial year. Absolutely laudable, sir. And I commend not only the Honourable Prime Minister for leading this drive, but the committee, Standing Orders Committee, which has so speedily brought this report to Parliament, sir, and the Honourable Attorney General for laying this report before Parliament today. We need, sir, of course, to in fact strengthen our democracy even more, and that's why this government is committed on principle to bring freedom of information legislation, sir, because there's nothing short of national security issues, sir, issues of defense, which must meaningfully be hidden from the people of Barbados, sir, because it is in our personal fiefdom. This is in our private home and dominion, sir. This is ours for the time being, at the will of the people, at the will of the Almighty, sir. And the people of Barbados must have information which they request. That is why, sir, we have brought changes to the procurement practices of government, sir. Something, again, that the LP administration promised to do. But stamps got taken up, the match finished, sir, sometime in early March, without them bringing any procurement legislation to Parliament, sir. Something fundamental in terms of fairness and justice and accountability, and that is why, sir, this government has earmarked 5% of government contracts for goods and services to go to people within communities, sir, and people who make up the most vulnerable sectors of Barbados, and And that is why 1% of all these contracts, sir, will go to people with disabilities, sir. That is a government that is caring. That is a government that has said, look, you've given us an overwhelming mandate, but we're not going to abuse this mandate. We're going to use it to empower the people whom we serve and to be more transparent, to gain their confidence, sir, to eliminate corruption in high places, sir, and bribery, which destroys not only the moral fabric of a country, but diminishes its economic and socio development. And that is what governance is about. I'm extremely happy, sir, that ministers in the other place, sir, if their heads are called, will also be compelled to come here. As we know, sir, we don't have a bicameral system like in some OECS jurisdictions. I believe Dominica may be one OECS jurisdiction, our CARICOM sister, that has bicameral systems, sir. Subject to correction, I believe Dominica, but certainly at least one OECS nation state has it. We don't have it, sir. So I am especially happy that the three ministers in the other place may very well have to come and be questioned as well if their heads are called, sir.
I remember, I think that Dominica has a unique unicameral system.
They have
we have a bicameral,
right,
which is separate too.
Right.
I think Dominica has a unique unicameral system that involves both. Yeah.
Both. That's it, sir.
Yes.
You're absolutely correct. Both the members of elected members and the senators sit together. That's exactly correct. And we don't have that system, sir. So, you know, sir, if a head is called, you know, innovation, science and technology, the Honourable Minister in the other place would have to come, sir, and be questioned here by her cabinet and parliamentary colleagues, and that's what democracy is about. As the Honourable Member for St. James Central said, we never had a foreign policy debate in here in the 5 years, 3 months that I was in Parliament between 2013 and 2018, because the Minister for Foreign Affairs sat in the other place and no debate on foreign affairs was ever brought before this Parliament. We had, during the estimates, sir, we had a farce, sir. That is what it was, a 40-hour farce, as has been said, sir, by other honourable members today of government ministers, getting up and congratulating the one another, sir, as we would say in normal Barbadian parlance. And sir, quite frankly, sir, as opposition MPs, you would put up your hand to speak, and the then speaker would ignore you. You put up your hand and you get ignored, and a government member speak. That was par for the course in here, sir. Frustration, waste of 40 hours, 2 heads debated, and then they bring a third, maybe 2 hours before the 6:30 cut-off point, sir. When, as the Honourable Prime Minister said earlier today, Parliament used to be accustomed in the 1960s and thing going on to 2 o'clock in the morning, and members speaking 6 hours on a trot and all of that, sir. So that was how democracy was stifled in this Parliament. And as has been said earlier, sir, 2 or 3 innocuous heads that not causing any controversy, sir. In other words, the Ministry of Finance, for instance, was never debated, to use that as an example, sir. So what we have here in this resolution, in this report, sir, is the proposal which members will vote on this afternoon, that you debate 6 heads, sir. 6 heads over the course of time. And the questions must be succinct, the answers, I believe, no more than 15 minutes in length, so that we look to get through the 6 heads. Much better utilization of time and effort, sir. But that is what, as I said, this government is about. We have proposed in our manifesto to involve the people in a referendum, sir, on wedge issues. And all of this, sir, is about widening our democracy, our accountability, our transparency for the good and for the advancement of this country. Because Barbados, sir, as we all know, had a reputation of being one of the leading developing countries in the world, the leading black nation in the world. So that's how it used to be described. The leading small island in the world, sir. Described by no less a person than the Right Honourable Prime Minister of St. Vincent, sir, as the concept of Barbados, sir. Standing proud in international arenas. But for a 10-year period between 2008 and 2018, sir, when really and truly, sir, it was difficult to believe you were living in the same country that had hitherto had that reputation. We had a situation, sir, and I mean, sir, we have to repeat these things, sir, because they're so appalling, where 3 members of a cabinet actually refused to appear before a Public Accounts Committee, a constitutionally constituted committee from the time of independence, set up to be led by the leader of the opposition for that reason, sir, that there'll be accountability and transparency by cabinet ministers to the people of Barbados through this committee. And 3 members advised by attorneys at law who, I suppose, had to sing for their supper, sir, writing the Public Accounts Committee and saying that their clients are not going to appear. Not appearing before a Public Accounts Committee to be answerable to the people of Barbados, sir. We're not like that, sir. The public gave us, yes, all the seats, but we have said we will examine ourselves, therefore, on the floor of this Parliament. You have the leader of the opposition, sir, who has, you know, and that's his personal decision, sir, to do what he did, and he will be there to serve as the opposition element. I'm sure he will use the opportunity to question cabinet ministers in his articulate manner, sir, and I look forward to being questioned by him as well, sir. And all of this, sir, must augur well for our future parliamentary democracy, sir. And I am in full support of this resolution, which is the subject of this debate. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition and Honourable Member President Michael West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine a government with 20 members and an opposition with 10 in this House? I'll repeat that so that you might hear. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, a government with 20 members and an opposition with 10 in this House? Those are the words of the Honourable Member for St. George North in this debate today. They reflect an understanding of the importance, the critical importance that our democracy, both with respect to its institutional architecture, our processes and our practices, are reflected in this honourable chamber. He is suggesting, in the context of this debate, the debate over this matter, this report, the resolution that gives focus on this report, that in terms of our institutional architecture, our processes and practices, democracy ought always to be reflected at the highest level in our country, and that is right here in this chamber. I say that to suggest, Mr. Speaker, I don't need to find a sense of justification or vindication of having crossed the floor to the opposition side in this chamber. I do not need to find that in the utterances of the honourable members on the other side. I say it simply to underscore the fact that it does seem to me that they understand the importance of protecting the institutional architecture and the systems which trigger the processes and practices around democracy in Barbados, not least in the Honourable House Assembly of Barbados. And so, with perhaps almost one voice, each member who has spoken thus far in this debate has underscored the importance of there being an actual physical presence of an opposition in this chamber. The only voice I can recall being exempted from that is the voice of the Honourable Prime Minister, Member St. Michael Northeast. And that is not to reflect negatively on her. That is not to suggest that she does not embrace or accept these things. I am simply saying, whether intentionally or otherwise, every single member on the government side, with the exception of that honourable member speaking in this debate, has underscored the importance of preserving the institutional architecture around the processes and practices that accompany our democratic culture as obtains in this country and in this House. And in that I find some justification. And perhaps one can understand that in politics, actions from time to time may be taken out of a sense of noble purpose and not in the interests of any self-advancement or self-seeking. So they've established for yourself, Mr. Speaker, for myself, and for the rest of Barbados who listen today, that it is important in the context of the anticipated passing of this measure that we do have an opposition in the House Assembly of Barbados. Now, Mr. Speaker, they have expressed the view that it is a wonderful opportunity for the leader of the opposition to get to ask questions of ministers in this House. Repeatedly, I have heard it said by several of those speakers that this is a wonderful opportunity for the opposition voice to be able to ask questions in this House. I am reassured in hearing that repeated today, because I was beginning to form the view that my questions asked in this House constituted a nuisance and was stirring a spirit of intolerance on the other side when those questions were raised. Mr. Speaker, because I've raised several over the last several months, and the responses coming at the time from those who chose to respond suggested that I could better otherwise have used the House's time and my time in terms of the privilege of speaking and addressing the chamber. Mr. Speaker, one of the questions I asked was this, and you may recall: how much is White Oak's advisory being paid by the government of Barbados? What exactly are they doing? That is the White Oaks Advisory Group. And do they have any local connections, Mr. Speaker? That question was not properly responded to by the Honourable member from St. Michael Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister. It was asked at the time of the presentation of what we refer to as the mini budget. To date, we have not been properly answered on that matter. So I'm a little bit taken aback that members today rejoice over the wonderful opportunity that the Leader of the Opposition will now have to question ministers on the floor of this House in relation to the estimates coming from a question asked as well, Mr. Speaker. Is it true that any of government's economic or financial advisors is being paid over $300,000 per year? I said I don't know, I still don't know, but I asked the question. The response coming from the Honourable member for St. Joseph, who led off that debate at the time, was simply, I don't know. So I didn't know, and he didn't know, and I don't know if you know, Mr. Speaker, but I suspect several in Barbados still don't know. Mr. Speaker, question. In light of government cancelling its debt to the central bank, what are the implications for local debt holders, including pensioners and local financial institutions? Answer from the Honourable member for Christchurch East Central. We will ring fence and protect the non-institutional investors. The answer turned out not to be accurate. So you may have a wonderful opportunity to ask questions, but it could very well be that questions are not answered, or that questions are not answered accurately. And I raise these matters, Mr. Speaker, because during the course of the debate, while two speakers sort of implied that maybe the questions up until this point in time asked by the Leader of the Opposition did not carry much substance or weight. I raise them again. That opinion may be retained by those who hold it, but the questions remain, and the answers are still not yet forthcoming. Mr. Speaker, question. Is there any reason for public concern of pending bus fare increases? Not a word in response from the minister responsible for public works and maintenance and transport. And that was asked, question was asked more than once. But today, not a word of response from the Honourable member for Christchurch West. Question, Mr. Speaker. Is there a justified sense of fear among the public with respect to pending layoffs in the public sector that question was asked early in this term of Parliament, the response from the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, Minister in the Ministry of Finance responsible for investment, there are no such fears being voiced. Mr. Speaker, that turned out not to be accurate. And I want to quit before I trespass too far. But, you know, we aren't supposed to hear asides. But I can hear some asides coming out of St. Thomas.
Honourable Member for St. Michael.
Yes, yes, sir.
In the event that you hear
asides,
those asides,
ignore them.
as we say, you can express judicial deafness to those. You can do that. You can exhibit judicial deafness to those and continue, sir.
And as always, I'm guided by you, Mr. Speaker. So judicially, I am deaf, but I'm certainly not dumb. And the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, during her submission, spoke with reference to the fact that she had asked herself many questions of the last administration which were not answered. And she said that, Mr. Speaker, when she was on her feet. So there is the problem in the Parliament of questions being raised and answers not being given. And we do not want to know, Mr. Speaker, that as a result of this measure when passed and implemented, that we have a situation where when questions are asked, the answers are not fully yielded or yielded in such a manner as that no information is conveyed to the Parliament or to the public. Because, Mr. Speaker, you know that these things can happen. I haven't mentioned anything about Coverley. Asked a question about that too. The answer was partial, again from the Honourable Prime Minister. Asked questions about external creditors. When will the negotiations be completed? To date, Mr. Speaker, we still don't know. Raise issues about the appointment of judges and possible constitutional amendments to effect a better situation. With respect to that, we are yet to see action taken. And a question in relation to ministerial potential abuse of prime ministerial power. And these issues, these questions, have been thus far dismissed or discarded. No. But I want to move on from that. Mr. Speaker, just a couple of remarks, because I really didn't plan to speak even this long. The Honourable Attorney General, member for St. Joseph, when he spoke, suggested that the Parliament now will move to a place where we employ electronic notice. Notices of bills are received electronically. I think that that is what we heard. We want to move away, as I understand it, from use of all of this paper clutter, and we want to go with the technology and have bills given notice electronically. I simply would want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, that just as members on the front bench of the government have been armed with the requisite technological facilities, laptops, tablets, whatever they are, if that is the case as I understand it, I simply want to suggest, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Speaker should so be armed. The Honourable members who sit quietly and deferentially on the back bench on either side should likewise be armed. And your humble servant, Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition, I emphasize the word loyal opposition, should similarly, Mr. Speaker, I would expect be armed. It is a fact that I prefer the paper, but if others are going to be so facilitated to facilitate that move to technology, I think all of us should be served with that benefit. As I look around, it seems not to be the case. So I put that on the table now, Mr. Speaker. Section 65. Section 65 of this report at paragraph 2 or clause 2, whatever you call it, and it's on page 5. It says the Standing Finance Committee shall be empowered to send for relevant accounting officers, permanent secretaries, and technical officers to provide information and to be questioned by the committee. I think we all understand that. My questions or queries relate to the process, because it is the Standing Finance Committee that is empowered to send for these persons to come here. But should the honourable member for St. Michael Northwest, as a member of a full committee of the House, should he determine that based on the goings on, he wants to see the Chief Technical Officer from the Ministry of Public Works come here, how is that process facilitated? We need to understand this. And is it possible that he may want to have someone summoned here, but yet the fuller committee determines otherwise, that they do not want that person to come? I think we need to have that clarified. Should the leader of the opposition want someone from the Ministry of the Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy to come down here and to answer some questions in relation to all this plastics business, is it possible that the committee, by fuller decision, may determine that that person is not to come? We need that clarified. The process is what we're talking about. So who gives the summons? What is the process by which it leaves the committee and reaches the intended target of the summons, Mr. Speaker? And at what point is that given effect to? Because if during the course of an interview of the people from the Ministry of Labor and Social Partnership, the ministry led by the honourable member from St. Peter, who ignores me at this moment, Mr. Speaker, if we want to have someone come from there and we're interviewing that one here in the well of the House, and it suddenly occurs to me that we need to have someone else here because of something that comes up in the debate. How does that, the timelines, this is one question, Mr. Speaker, is the process involving the timelines, the procedures as to how we can give effect to this. All I'm asking for is some clarity there. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is my view that though this legislation may be well-intentioned, there is the potential for conflict and for a clash of both the precept and culture obtaining around the business of collective cabinet responsibility and the pursuit of these aims as intended by this legislation. In other words, Mr. Speaker, there will be those who will come to the well of this House and to attend, to render assistance to ministers who are being interviewed on the well of this House with respect to their estimates. I see the potential that, given the precepts and the culture of collective cabinet responsibility, as we pursue these intended aims under this arrangement proposed here, we can have some conflict, clashes. I think it's something that needs to be seriously considered. After all, Mr. Speaker, you have a chamber that is occupied by 23 members of cabinet. 23 members of cabinet. And then in fact there are two officers of this honorable chamber, yourself being one, Mr. Speaker, and the other one is the chairman of committees who will be presiding over that committee of the full House, who are taken out of the debate and have no voice. Mr. Speaker, I'm judicially deaf. Not every prayer is answered, Mr. Speaker. And the point here is you have ministers who will be questioning their colleagues. You have ministers, if this is taken seriously to its full and intended end, can run into conflict with their colleagues. I'm saying potentially there exists the possibility that you will have a clash of that precept and culture around collective responsibility and our pursuit of these objectives as outlined in this bill. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's also the issue of the Prime Ministerial Whip. There's also the issue of the Prime Ministerial Whip. These things are real in parliamentary democracies. This is no judgment being passed on the incumbent Prime Minister. This was so before the Prime Minister was a member from St. Michael Northeast. Our practice of democracy, parliamentary democracy, gives the executive inordinate power over the legislature. The Prime Minister has inordinate power over the executive, especially an executive that has 23 members sitting in this chamber. It means, Mr. Speaker, that sentiment comes out of Bay Street, which will dictate outcomes in this chamber. Sentiment comes out of Bay Street, embodied in 23 persons, who can be dictated to by the Honourable Prime Minister, and then that sentiment becomes the dynamic that rules in here. All I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to vote against this legislation. I support it. All I'm saying is, when we do these things, we have to consider these issues, for they are real. And Barbadians do not want to know that we're simply putting on a show. And what we have in the Parliament of Barbados, because of how it is presently configured with one opposition member, Barbadians do not want to know that what we have is a show of democracy, a show of transparency. Barbadians do not want to know that. So that ministers come here and go through the motions of putting colleagues under scrutiny. That's all I'm saying. These things are real. As I said, Mr. Speaker, I will vote for this. Now I can stand here. I can go out on St. Lucie and talk about roads. I can go and talk about IC Bridge. I can go and talk about trust program. I can go and talk about all of those things as I heard mentioned here today. Or because of my own personal sentiment and training, I can zero in on these matters because they concern me, and I have a responsibility in this House to reflect fully as I'm capable of on these matters. And I'm saying, with this proposed legislation, which is good, it is novel, we have to make it work, but as we attempt to do that, there are some issues that have to be addressed in our own minds, and even as we pursue the process to fruition. Mr. Speaker, perhaps I will say one more thing. I'll sit down. On page, I can refer to the minutes of this report. On page 9 of this thing. On page 9 of this document. On page 9 of the report. I'm still judicially deaf.
Continue, Honourable.
On page 9 of this report, Mr. Speaker. On page 9 of this report, Mr. Speaker, and I can quote from this, right? This is the voice of the clerk. so that it makes sense once this system gets going, that next year where the committee is then questioning ministers about programs, that you would have some report on how successful you were in implementing those ones for which you were given the money. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East then speaks. Sorry? Page 9. Page 9 of the minutes. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East then speaks. Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, would this make more sense if we had a proper opposition? Because imagine if you had this facility to act here. Clearly what is being considered is the context in which it is coming, and a view is being expressed that this is useful but would be far exceedingly more useful if we had a proper opposition. We get a proper opposition. I'm just saying that for now. The Chairman, Mr. Speaker, you will see where the money has gone. The Honourable Member for St. Andrew then speaks. Are you saying that we do not have an opposition? We do not really need this? Now, Mr. Speaker, the clerk, but you have to put things in place. Honourable Member St. Andrew, I agree with you, but at the same time, it is like the horse has bolted right now. And my understanding of this, Mr. Speaker, is that the members of the Standing Orders Committee of this House who brought us this report came to the point where they recognized that this amendment, these amendments, would be rather useful, but that were the House otherwise configured than a 28-1, it would be rather more useful.
Honourable Member, that is, with the greatest respect, that is your interpretation. That is your interpretation.
And that is precisely so.
Right. That is your interpretation of what has been said. You interpret that to mean that, correct, sir? Continue, Honourable Member. And
that is precisely so. That is my interpretation. Now, beyond the fact that they consider that these amendments are rather useful, but seem to lament the fact that we don't have a better balance in the House, reinforces the point I made earlier, that they understand the importance of democracy, both institutionally and practically in this chamber. Now, Mr. Speaker, I will not attribute foul intention to the mouth of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East. I will not do that, and that's not intended. He's a constituent, one, and two, he is an honourable man. In fact, Mr. Speaker, they are all honourable men and women. So I do not, and women, they are all honourable men and women. I have the highest regard for all of them. Mr.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas, I would appreciate kindly if you could allow the Honourable Member for St. Michael West to continue his speech uninterrupted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your protection. The Honourable Member may not always behave herself, but she's an honourable lady. They are all honourable women and men, and that is my honest and heartfelt view. So I don't put foul intention in the mouth of the Honourable Member for Christchurch East when he says, if we had an opposition. I do not even put it in the mouth of the Honourable Member for St. Andrew when he repeats the reference to the absence of an opposition. But the language is unfortunate. And though it does not trouble me personally, these records stand to be read by posterity. And the language is unfortunate because those who read it hereafter, we are no longer here, may have a totally different interpretation on the use of this word the use of these phrasing, well, no opposition, and little opposition, and poor opposition, and proper opposition, and all of that. Mr. Speaker, that's all I have to say, though. I thank you.
Honourable Mr. Michael, West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the resolution before this honourable chamber. And Mr. Speaker, I should also extend thanks to the Select Committee for undertaking the work which brought us to this point. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that this is a new era in public finance, and certainly, which is likely to follow, accountability. I believe it was in 2006, I believe 2007, when this Barbados Labour Party, in a former administration, in this very place, wanted to move in a similar direction and came as close as possible to that, I believe, when I look back between the period 2006-2007, when they had the estimates debate and a budget following. So I really believe that this is a momentous occasion for accountability and transparency. And I want to say how happy I am that we have come to this point in our political democracy. Mr. Speaker, what is before us will definitely allow us to examine in greater detail the estimates. And it is important, sir, for all of us who participate in this chamber and for the wider public to have an understanding of how we form the estimates, the debate, and how matters come to the conclusion insofar as the estimates debate and then on to the budget. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of Supply, as I note in the report, will now be renamed the Standing Finance Committee, and it will have the powers to send or summons persons, I believe, and I believe those persons are listed as the permanent secretaries and our technical officers and ministers included, to the well of the Parliament to ask any questions arising from the estimates. And I want to reiterate, sir, and I believe I said it during the debate, I believe that was around the 15th of January, the Public Finance Management Bill. When I made the call on this floor for what I believe will naturally follow, for those who are responsible for managing public finance to undertake additional training in finance. Because as I review the estimates, and I did so when we got here, when we were given the booklet, and I reviewed it, and I went through and I was making some detailed analyses of the estimates at the time, just to see not the estimates laid by this government, but the estimates laid by the former administration. And I came to a conclusion based on what I saw, that this will require additional training in finance. The fact that you will now have these persons come into this honourable chamber, subjecting themselves to questions from members of Parliament like myself on behalf of the constituents of St. Michael West Central, I believe that when the questions are posed, they would have to be in a position to answer them. So I know that it will be revolutionary in a sense, because it's the first time it's happening here in Barbados, that you will have an opportunity to ask key questions. And I think that's alive and well and healthy for democracy, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot openly, during an election campaign, talk about transparency and accountability without living up to the true words of transparency and accountability. And I must commend the government, because the government has taken an opportunity to bring greater discipline and control to public finance. And as a result of the, be it the Public Finance Management Act, be it the process that we're going through today in order to validate and maybe question expenditure, I think is a wonderful, and not to forget integrity legislation as well. I believe, sir, that this new form of governance will be welcomed by all Barbadians. Mr. Speaker, I believe the open that it gives, and what I will consider it to be parliamentary democracy. It is now, Mr. Speaker, you have not only parliamentary democracy, but you have openness. You have a situation, Mr. Speaker, where the country on the whole will be able to listen to a minister, a permanent secretary, and technical officers or other accounting officers being asked questions and having to answer questions in relation to how the taxpayers' money is being spent in this country. And I believe it's a wonderful opportunity, and that's why I say it is about openness, it's about parliamentary democracy, Mr. Speaker, but above all, it's now about the continuation of good governance in the country. So I welcome that move. So I welcome the move. The Leader of the Opposition referred to it, I believe at 67 too. The process of sending for relevant ministers or permanent secretaries or accounting officers or technical officers, Mr. Speaker, we welcome that. And we have, if we are going to live in an era of transparency, then those who work and draw money at the Crown's expense should be in here to answer to the people's representatives, Mr. Speaker, and I feel strongly about that. I know that you will have an opportunity, in accordance with the report before us, for honourable members like myself, sir, to ask questions, and I will say this, that I will be asking questions on behalf of the people of St. Michael West Central. And if you wish, sir, with your permission, I can ask questions on your behalf too. But we will be asking questions. So, for example, Mr. Speaker, I'll be able to ask the honourable member, sir, for St. George South questions on his progress relating, I can't caption the head right now, the estimates on the trust loan scheme. And I will be able to ask him how much money he's disbursed to date, and whether or not the good constituents of St. Michael West Central, how many constituents or businesses registered in St. Michael West Central would have benefited from the trust loan scheme. I am sure, sir, that he would respond in the affirmative and tell me perhaps in excess of 30, sir, which would be a good share. So I look forward, sir, to the wonderful opportunity to my colleague from St. George South having to update me, sir, on the activities regarding the trust loan scheme. A wonderful initiative, Mr. Speaker, announced by the leader of this great political party in this House during her budget, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member of St. Michael Northeast, and I am grateful for that because it's coming in and it's assisting our people. So it would give me a wonderful opportunity to ask the minister for a little bit of a progress or status report in respect of that. But Mr. Speaker, I think the integral, one of the, if not the integral part of this bill, sorry, the resolution before us, has to do with what I would refer to as the integration of the ways and means, the budget as we understand it, and the supply, the estimates. Like I said, before it was an exercise, it was a separate exercise. You had the ways and means, and then you had the supply, sorry, and then you had the ways and means. And what is the clear path emerging from the report, sir, is to have not separate events, but to have an opportunity where the government sets out its program through supply or estimates as referred to it. The government will then, through a budget, tell the country how it intends to support or fund the programs contained in its estimates. And beyond that, Mr. Speaker, that we will have an opportunity whereby in this very chamber, you will have what I refer to as the accounting for the true cost of government, sir. And that, Mr. Speaker, is a welcome opportunity. Because, and I make the point about the true cost of government, because we came in, we won an election campaign. And leading up to that during election campaign, if we had an arrangement as proposed today, sir, and that will become a feature of our parliamentary democracy, this country would have understood the extent of the fiscal indiscipline undertaken by the last administration. In opposition, Mr. Speaker, the Barbados Labour Party asked questions. Sometimes, as was told, Mr. Speaker, you were not in a position to debate all the heads because the government strategy of the day would have been that you weren't allowed enough time to have, I believe, second reading speeches. So that, Mr. Speaker, had we had this amendment or this change, we would have perhaps been in a better position to understand what took place during the period 2008 to 2018 May, Mr. Speaker, and that is a fact. Mr. Speaker, if we had this legislation, if we had this change, Mr. Speaker, the people of Barbados would have understood why there had to be debt restructuring, and why the Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, had to pull this country back from the precipice of despair, and that we had then to use other opportunities like debt restructuring to give the government breathing room, because we had to repair the damage and try to restore hope and prosperity to a country, because we were in a situation where the country was not on a sustainable path, Mr. Speaker. If we had that, Mr. Speaker, what we're debating today, there would have been fiscal prudence as well, and that is what we miss, sir. And to the leader of the opposition's questions, Mr. Speaker, and he reserves the right to ask questions. And if we had this change in place, the questions that he asked perhaps would have been answered. Mr. Speaker, he asked about white oat, and he asked questions surrounding white oat. Mr. Speaker, I don't sit in the cabinet, so I can't answer about how much money white oat is being paid. But Mr. Speaker, what I can say, that as a result of white oat, that the government, and when he say the government, I will also say the people of Barbados, would have saved in excess of $500 million in interest per year. So I can't answer you, sir, on the issue of costs. But what I can say to you, sir, that White Oak participated in a debt restructuring program that saved $500 million in interest per year. And Mr. Speaker, I'm happy they did it, because I would not have wanted, and I wouldn't want $500 million to be transferred to the constituents in part of St. Michael West Central. So I would prefer, sir, if we had the principle of sharing, so on that point. But I can't answer him on the appeal. And I just thought I would make that intervention to the leader of the opposition in respect of White Oak, to make the invaluable point that if we had other processes for governance, for the protection of governance as we are instituting, Mr. Speaker, we perhaps will be in a better place, and that is the point I want to make. Mr. Speaker, the 2018-2019 estimates, not laid by the Barbados Labour Party, laid by the former administration, Mr. Speaker, had projected revenues of $3.23 billion, an expenditure of about $4.45 billion, Mr. Speaker, as revised. Now, if we had an opportunity to have a public discourse to understand how we construct the revenue and how the expenditure items were constructed, Mr. Speaker, we would be in a better position, and certainly all Barbadians, including the constituents of St. Michael West Central, will have a better understanding of what happens in government. And I take, for example, we have a situation where there have to be transfers to statutory entities. If that information is widely known, then perhaps we'll have a greater appreciation and understanding from the public in respect of how these institutions function. Mr. Speaker, the same thing applies to the welfare vote. The country should know that we spend perhaps in excess of $24 million in welfare as a social protection flooring to help those, Mr. Speaker, who can't help themselves. And I think it will lend to greater understanding in respect of these processes. Mr. Speaker, the country will have an opportunity to evaluate the effectiveness of a Minister of Finance, and certainly a minister. Mr. Speaker, if we had this before, back in the day, before the Barbados Labour Party came to office, we would perhaps have allowed the country to have and render a verdict on perhaps former ministers and certainly all of them. But we didn't have the opportunity. But the opportunity will now be granted for the country to understand and for the country to hear from those who are paid from the taxpayers' purse to perform the function so entrusted to them, Mr. Speaker. And for that, I am grateful. But I also believe, and I believe the Leader of the Opposition went there as well, he talked about, I believe it was on page 9, with respect to what obtains in Trinidad and Tobago. In Trinidad, as we know, the model is that you have the appropriation and you have a parliamentary, I believe, oversight committee. And there are mandated, once the estimates are approved, to go back and have a review of the programs. Mr. Speaker, I think we are still in the process of building out what I refer to as this parliamentary democracy insofar these changes are concerned. And I believe that could be a second step, a follow-up step. Like I believe, Mr. Speaker, that going forward, it will be useful for us not to have only 40 hours, but maybe to have more than 40 hours in order to go through more heads. But I accept that this is a first step. It is a good step by the government, which I proudly associate myself with, Mr. Speaker. And I know that, like everything else, we will go through a process of reform, and I believe that will, based on our path, Mr. Speaker, that we will do that in short time, Mr. Speaker. But the greater point, Mr. Speaker, is that we are now moving in a direction that will help the country understand how we build our revenues and how we expend monies in this country, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that is a great and a wonderful step. I look forward, sir, with great interest, to having the opportunity to ask questions on behalf of the people who sent me to this chamber, this honorable chamber. And I look forward to the answers, sir, to be provided by those who are charged with executing their duties and responsibilities in the name of the people who sent them here. And I believe somebody made the point earlier that we have nothing to hide. And insofar as we have nothing to hide, Mr. Speaker, I believe it will be a wonderful opportunity for us. But I make the point that the experience in particular of the last 10 years, we shall never forget. And we must ensure that we have the governance protocols in place to safeguard taxpayers' money, Mr. Speaker. That we have the protocols in place to ensure that we have a very transparent process. The people elected us. They elected us, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we have and we secure a better foundation for them. And I am very happy, sir, that like the Public Finance Management Bill, like integrity legislation, like all the other measures to follow, that this Barbados Labour Party has kept its word to electorate. And when we said that we were going to introduce a more transparent form of governance, that when we look back, and clearly when the records are written, sir, the people of Barbados will say to the Barbados Labour Party, well done, thou good and faithful servant, Mr. Speaker. And it gives me the greatest joy to associate myself with this resolution and to associate myself with a progressive government, with a government that understands, Mr. Speaker, that the way forward must be about protecting the public purse, and that they have said to us, we have given you the mandate. And clearly they continue to say to me, as I canvass, and I did so up to yesterday in St. Stephen's Land Scheme, Mr. Speaker, and I did 42 houses, and I will continue to do so, sir. And if not for us having being present, I perhaps would be in Burton Road, in further on St. Stephen's Land Scheme and St. Stephen's Hill, knocking on some doors, sir, because that's my duty, and I don't intend to relinquish St. Michael West Central, and therefore I have no choice but to canvass like you do, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to commend the resolution, continue to give my support, sir, and to say to those who would have participated in the report to compliment them and to thank them really for a job well done. And with those few remarks, I'm much obliged.
Mr. Speaker, I did say at the beginning of this debate that it isn't usual that amendments to the standing orders would engender such discussion. But I'm heartened, sir, that the members of this chamber, on both sides, physically and otherwise, have recognized, Mr. Speaker, that we are on the cusp of a change in the way in which we do things. The estimates, Mr. Speaker, are expected to be laid in this chamber next Tuesday. And very shortly thereafter, I expect that we will actually be beginning what for us will be a new experiment, but for what for others across the region is the way in which things are ordinarily done. But whatever description you apply to it, the public of Barbados can rest assured that it is being done with the best interests of political discourse in mind and with a keen eye to transparency in public life, transparency in public financing. I think I have often said in this chamber, sir, that it is not usual for a politician or a political party to act in such a way as to hamstring the way in which they do things. It is a most unusual trait, perhaps. People tend not to want to place restrictions on themselves. But we have come to this point recognizing the glaring failings of an estimates process over decades, and we are committed to ensuring that a more relevant and accountable process is embarked on. As with anything though, sir, one always discovers that the opportunities to tweak things, perhaps we will never achieve the nirvana of perfection, but even as we were debating today, we reflected on the fact that there were one or two small elements that I've shared with the Leader of the Opposition and other members of the committee, and those elements, sir, only serve to clarify a number of things. One, it clarifies, sir, that the entire estimates debate process will not be limited to 5 days. It clarifies, Mr. Speaker, that the debate on the estimates as a standing finance committee will take place over a 5-day period. It doesn't have to be a period of 5 consecutive days, but it will take place over a 5-day period. But at the end of that committee reports back to Parliament just like any other select committee or another piece of legislation. And it is then, sir, that we go into what is called the second reading speeches. And it is then, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, if she chooses, will present a debate. In the event that she chooses to present a budget, the process that we've put in place will now be that the budget is presented, the speeches will pause for that day, and on the following day the Leader of the Opposition would respond, and then the budget would continue up to a maximum of 3 days. In the event that the Minister of Finance chooses not to do a budget, her second reading speech and the rest of the debate will pass in the ordinary course of things. I think it is well known that for many years budgets have been things that would come later in the year, and people have been wondering. They used to call it the black bag or the black box, black box, but it was never a box. That's the thing; it was always a bag. But anyway, sir. So what we've done is just to tweak, and your Honour the Speaker and the Leader of the Opposition and other members of the committee have seen the particular clauses amended, and I therefore wish to move, sir, the adoption of this report with the amendments as have been circulated. And I wish all of our new ministers especially the very best in the upcoming estimates. I know that hearing some of the things that have been discussed, a few of you have probably begun to worry. But I promise you, sir, that the Leader of the Opposition will go lightly on you this once. I'm obliged to you. Second. Somebody second. Mr. Speaker, the clerk at the table has asked that for the record I stipulate specifically what the amendment is that has been made. You have it? Yeah, I'll read it into the record. You have it? Let me in. And therefore, sir, for the avoidance of doubt and in the interest of the record, the heading of Order 63 is amended to say presentation and second reading of appropriation bill with, and the words or without budgetary proposals have been added. So in that head, sir, the words or without have been inserted. In Order 63, Rule 4, at the beginning of that clause, the words no more than have been inserted. So it now reads, no more than 3 weeks after the introduction of the appropriation bill. In Order 63, Rule 6, at the beginning of Clause 6, the following words are added. In the event that the Minister of Finance presents a budget. So that clause now reads, in the event that the Minister of Finance presents a budget, the debate shall, on the conclusion of that speech, continue on the following day, and so on. And Clause 7, Order 63.7, sets out what happens in the event that the Minister responsible does not present a budget, and that clause now reads, in the event that the Minister responsible for finance does not present a budget, the debate shall continue and be limited to 3 days. And that Order 68, Rule 2, that clause is amended by inserting after the word the Minister the following: responsible for finance at the conclusion of the second reading. So that clause will now read in its entirety. A motion for the third reading shall be made by the Minister responsible for finance at the conclusion of the second reading and shall be decided without amendment or debate. Again, sir, I move that the report be adopted with the standing orders as amended and as have been circulated to the clerks at the table.
Question is that the report be, with the amendments be adopted. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. We'll move it a second. The resolution is so adopted.
We can bring
Mr. Speaker, I move that this sitting be suspended until 6 o'clock.
Question is that this honorable chamber be suspended until 6 o'clock. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber is suspended until 6 p.m. 6 p.m.